everybody, Ivana here with you today, the founder and owner of Pigment Craft Co. and a self-confessed stamping addict. Today's video is a super exciting one. So many of you have asked about what type of ink we use, which is why we're thrilled to officially introduce the new Pigment Palette, the arrival of our premium dye ink. In today's video, we'll break down the colors, then chat a little more about tips, as well as the fabulous new swatching system designed for swatching addicts like us, which will help you organize all this color goodness. So come on, let's dive in. First up, let's take a look at the ink. The Pigment Palette collection consists of 10 signature colors, which we have lovingly dubbed as Pigment's Fall Collection, but it can be used all year round. It consists of warm ochres, rusty oranges, including a peachy and reddish orange hue, and cool greens. The yellows are turmeric, seagrass. The oranges and peaches consist of glow, quince, terracotta, and fig. And the greens are jade, eucalyptus, sage, and fir, for a total of 10 smashing hues. Here we have the colors stamped up, and as you can see, the colors graduate in intensity as well as in richness, but all colors have a soft, muted signature pigment look. Y'all have asked how we achieved our soft colors so often, and we're thrilled that you can now start building your own palette of colors, just like the ones we've been using on our projects. What's most exciting about our hues is that they're super soft, yet still pop in projects. Each color has been carefully curated to ensure that the undertones give way to versatility. This means that all colors are guaranteed to work with one another, which is especially great news for anyone who struggles with color selection. Keep watching to see our virtually foolproof palettes. Color aside, Pigment Craft Co inks feature a water-based dye ink, which means it is suitable for all water-reactive techniques, such as watercoloring, water lifting, and so much more. The colors blend beautifully and work like a charm with our collection of stencils too. All pads are based on a foam surface. We love that this means we can fill them to the brim with color goodness. Can we get a yay for more value? And when the time comes to refill, we are happy to announce we'll be stocking a full refill collection as well. These little guys are also fantastic for all types of techniques. Stay tuned as we dive into these tips a little later in the video. We also love that the saturated pads mean that a single stamp is all it takes to get ultra smooth, even coverage. But like all things, if you've never worked with foam-based pads before, they can take a little bit of getting used to. Fret not, we have compiled a few helpful tips on how to get the most out of your new palette. Come on, let's dive in. A couple of gentle taps is all you need to get beautiful, even coverage. Generally speaking, stamping once should be all you need for fabulous stamping, but feel free to stamp again for even smoother coverage. The ink will usually dry to a smooth finish, even if there are initial imperfections like this. We will set this initial blotchy sample aside and take a peek after to show how it has dried up to super smooth silkiness. If you notice over-inking, which is easy to spot when you can see tiny bubbles, it usually means the pad has a lot of ink on the surface, which is not a bad thing. Still, we have a few tips that can help if you prefer supreme evenness right from the start. First, let's talk paper. We cannot stress enough how important paper is. In addition to our ink collection, our shop now stocks premium stamping paper, which will make your ink stamp like butter. Available in 8.5 by 11 sheets and 4 by 5 1/4 card bases for all of your stamping needs. Once you've cased paper, you can try giving your pads a rest. Shipping can sometimes disturb ink and push it to the surface, creating a saturated top. Letting the pads rest a few days before use can really help. It can also help to let them rest upright so that the top area of the pad will drip down naturally, creating a saturated and an unsaturated area that you can use. But we don't recommend leaving them like this for long, as it can result in ink pooling at the bottom. If that happens, just dip your brush in and use it as a watercolor. Lastly, you can also prime your pad like we do. This can be done by gently tapping your pad onto paper or your craft mat, which essentially removes some of the ink. But we think that can be a little bit of a waste of perfectly good ink, unless you decide to use it for swatching or a technique. Instead, we have a little trick up our sleeve that we like to use. But before we proceed, it's time for a disclaimer. Okay, now that we're all on the same page, if you're ready to brave this with us, grab a super smooth and soft silicone spatula or a palette knife with smooth edges. This is really important to ensure you do not accidentally tear your pads, and then ever so gently coax the top layer of ink off of the surface and deposit it near the bottom of the pad, where it can sit saturated and undisturbed. Let's do that again, but in slow-mo. Conversely, we can transfer this excess ink to a painter's palette where it can be reactivated with water down the line and used in watercoloring and other techniques. With a primed pad, your stamping goes from this to this. But also know you can skip this step entirely and your ink will still dry beautifully. Take a peek at the swatch that has been sitting for a while now. Also, rest assured, with just a little bit of use, your pads will settle all on their own as the ink makes its way to the bottom. Here is a good indication when ink has settled. It looks light and even versus the brand new, really saturated pad with oodles of ink goodness to use up. Okay, now that we have primed things up, let's dive into some stamping with our brand new swatching system. We have just launched a trio of products: Swatchbook Element Stamp, Swatchbook Elements Dies, and the Ink Palette Stamp. These coordinating stamps and dies work together to build a swatchbook flipbook like this, inspired by the rainbow of Pantone chipbooks. Let us explain each product a bit more. The Swatchbook Element Dies cut a single scored page. These pages can be cut from a single sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock, and we suggest cutting the cardstock in advance so the die fits perfectly. It is a close cut, so it helps to tape it up with a strip of washi tape to ensure no wiggling happens when cutting. This little page can be stamped or cut to create your own swatching bliss. The coordinating square dies help create cutout windows that, when folded, can feature cardstock swatches, felt, fabric, and so much more. Join us later in the video to see a fun palette building tip. Next, let's talk about the stamps. The Swatchbook Elements Stamp comes with pre-arranged squares and headings, as well as standalone elements to build your own, such as the outline, the solid cube and heart, and all of the titles. One really fun standout is that each color can be swatched in various ways, showing how an ink color changes with different mediums or techniques. For example, an ink can be swatched as a blend, a watercolor wash, a gouache, which is just reinker drops mixed with white paint, molding paste, reinker drops mixed with molding paste, a glaze, clear embossed, and more. There are also headings for different ink types, as well as labels for waterproof and water-based ink, should you wish to swatch ink not currently in the pigment lineup, along with 2 front or back covered title stamps for your swatch book. You'll notice there are no ink names included in this set, so we have created our ink palette stamp set, which has these lovely bold ink names. We love how fun these are for using in the swatch book. In fact, if you prefer to skip the swatching cubes, you can simply stamp the name in the coordinating color and use that as your swatch. You'll also notice solid rectangle stamps in the set. The long strip is perfect for swatching a strip for your pads and adhering it to the side. And this little guy is great for making ink palette strips to take with you on the go. Okay, back to the pages. Here are 2 pages. One that shows the prearranged squares with the ink color in black on the side. While for this variation, we have mixed up the cubes to make our own vertical palette with the ink name on its own page. The only thing left to do is add in the ink color, which can be done with the dies and stamps. Here is one with the heart stamp, and here's the other using the solid cube stamp. These are great if you happen to decide to use a sturdier paper for your swatchbook pages, one that might not be suitable for stamping. This way, you can add in your stamping cubes so the ink is smooth and beautiful. We prefer to use our stamping paper for the page base, as it becomes sturdy enough when the pages are folded. So, we stamp in the solid cube. Then we add the blend. Then the wash. Next, the gouache, which is just white paint mixed with a drop of reinker. And a little bit of paste, which is molding paste colored with reinker drops. As well as glaze, a mix of Mod Podge and a bit of reinker. The reason we love all the different swatching options is that some color mediums can alter saturation and hue of the ink color, and it's really lovely to be able to see these changes before choosing them for a project. Here's a great example of our fur color. See the differences? The wash makes for a very subtle hue, while the paste and glaze deepen the color. The gouache cools the color to almost a blue and softens it because of the white paint base. What this really means is that even with just a few reinker colors, you can achieve heaps of different tones and shades. And we have designed the prearranged cubes to show your primary techniques on front, and then when you flip, you can see the fun stuff. Notice how the fronts are softer and the backs are deeper in hue with all the mediums added in. Once all the coloring is done, the swatchbook sheet can now be folded in half and adhered. We like to score along the pre-scored line for an extra crisp fold and use strong double-sided tape like score tape to adhere. This step makes each sheet sturdier and allows for very easy flipping. This also provides front and back space for additional swatching down the line. We promise one last share, and that is a quick palette project using the dies only. We wanted the swatchbook to be more than just a handy guide of colors, and by cutting a few window sheets, we can use them as a color palette holder. Simply cut, adhere, and set aside to fill up with your favorite colors. To make your color cubes, swipe your pad across some paper and cut the cubes with the cube die. And here's where the fun starts. Use these ultra thin Velcro dots to adhere the cubes in the window holder. You can pull them off and switch them out as often as you like. We like to make many little cubes and store them in a baggie, as well as many little window holders. That way, when playing around with color palettes, we can quickly pick our favorites and tack them on. This little system also works perfectly for taking palettes on the go or for storing inside the flip book for project ideas down the road. You can also make a separate swatch book of all the color palettes for future reference. But our favorite part of our new Incline and Swatch book is that they were designed to make color selection a breeze. The colors have been painstakingly matched to all work together seamlessly, and picking your palette couldn't be easier. Simply leaf through and settle on a few hues and then line them up to suit your new palette. There's a lot more to come in terms of our ink and swatch line, but we hope this provides a fun overview of all the exciting ways to use this new release. Thank you for joining us today, friends. We wish you so much fun stamping. A world of color awaits. You can find the full Pigment Palette ink collection, as well as our swatching system and stamping cardstock over on our website at www.pigmentcraftco.com.